This. Welcome everybody, and good to see everybody. And we have Dave Schneider coming on in a little while. But before we do that, just one announcement, and then I'm going to share with you some highlights to the meet we had down in Memphis. So, for those of you that were on a Zoom, I don't know, one or two meets ago, one of my objectives is to look at how to cultivate new membership. And for those of you that are on, we have two that are with us tonight. Carl Johnson. Carl, welcome. And we have Austin Ebner, who is with us via microphone.
Hi.
Hey, Austin.
So what I always like to do is give you guys 1 or 2 minutes, the new guys, like, how did you find out about us? And what is your interest in Civil War railroads? So, Carl, why don't you kick it off? You're up.
It helps if I unmute, I guess. So, as all things in my life, finding you guys is difficult. Only from the standpoint that the local model railroad group, the Casey Jones, I'm a member of the TCA, the Toy Train Collectors Group, and they had on their website, it had a little bit of information about your group.
Right.
And when you were meeting in Memphis. And I thought, oh, cool. So when I went to the train show the weekend before, like 2 weekends ago now, when I got there, I said, so what about the Civil War Railroad group? And the guy at the desk was like, oh, that's old information. I said, well, I beg to differ only from the standpoint that you've got more events listed after that. So I think it's in line, but how do I find out about it? And he didn't know. And, I will say, I'm not sure how I stumbled onto the group. Tom reached out to me, as did a couple other people. And so it needs to be, I was happy to find it. But obviously it needs to be, better communication somehow. And I don't know how that all works. My interest in the Civil War railroads, I'm interested in trains in general, mainly the real thing. That's what I did for a living. And I just retired a month ago. So I'm happy playing with my toy trains at the moment. The phone doesn't ring in the middle of the night with problems, and all is well. So, but older trains, I'm kind of amazed that, I was very impressed at Charlie's. Was you can see my little toy train flyer from back when I was a kid. And I'm not that old, so it's not the Civil War stuff. But I still have my toy trains from when, back in the 60s. So.
Yeah, the cool thing about it is he lives near Charlie in Memphis, so you'll have a reasonably local operator. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and Charlie, I sent you an email.
Yeah, I've been babysitting. I just saw it today, and believe it, the next meet we have here or operating session, you're hired. Yeah.
Okay, well, no problem. I just want to make sure you got it. No,
yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Carl. So,
sure,
Austin, how did you find out about us, and what's your interest in the Civil War railroads?
Well, I can't exactly remember because it goes a bit far back how I was able to find the group. I think it was through Google, or just some internet searching. But I joined back in 2014 when the group was in the Yahoo forum, and was at the time, because the reason why I was internet searching was because I found a lot more. I was, getting up a little older, where I was getting interest in history and whatnot, and especially the Civil War. I already had a great fascination for the Civil War, and I live in Arkansas, so learning that there were many Civil War battlefields around was, a great thing, and kind of getting to recognize the local history. And then I've always been into trains ever since I was really little. I mean, my parents took me and my brothers to the to Strasburg and Steamtown whenever we lived on the East Coast for a little bit. So I had both of those installed in me, and then I was able to. I was like, well, how far back do railroads go? And of course, they go back earlier than the Civil War, and then they played a prominent role in the war. So it was really interesting learning about that and how it functioned and how they tried, how they supplied the armies, how they worked, and what locomotives were being technology advanced at the time. So it just all came within it all at once, and I was glad to join the group to get so much great information from y'all. And but I've just been a kind of a background member since. I've watched some of the Zooms following on the Yahoo, but I'm just finally glad to have been able to meet up with y'all, in Memphis, and see some faces I've seen and recognize new faces. So I really appreciate y'all including me in the group.
Yeah, Austin, how old are you?
25.
Dude, that's good. That's great. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks.
So, like I said, a couple of Zoom meets ago, we were talking about other ways, methods, sites, and we popped up with Facebook.
Yeah.
And there wasn't too much, at least for me, there wasn't much energy behind it because I didn't know how to use it, and I didn't want to deal with, like, a couple of you, people that didn't know anything and might be just trolling for stuff. However, we had a little breakthrough in that conversation during the meet with Roger and Austin. So Austin actually had a site, a Civil War Railroad site up on Facebook for a while. And Austin, if I missed something, just jump in here.
All right.
And then during the meet, we knocked it around a little bit, and Roger was saying that he would like to put a proposal together that would give us some guidelines and guardrails around how to do this to minimize or prevent anything from going sideways with that. So he put a great proposal together, and he and Austin have been working in concert to get this up. So we are now officially a Facebook page. But it's really more about getting people who are really interested to join the group. So if you want, you can take a look at it. You don't have to post anything. If you want to, feel free. But Roger and Austin are the administrators. I think Roger's really on point. So he's going to be screening people to know whether or not they should be in here or what have you. So I feel real comfortable with the fact that we got some firewalls around that. So that feels good. And Austin was kind enough to give his people a heads up that he's going to be folding his site, and if anybody was interested, to go to our group site. And evidently we've picked up a couple of members from there as well. So thank you for that, Austin. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Is there anything I missed that you want to add to that?
No, you put his spot down. Roger took head point. He did a wonderful proposal on limiting, or on putting out what we're going to limit and what guidelines we're going to follow. I think and Facebook allows a lot of those options where if you're an administrator, you can, it's a private group, so people have to request to join in, and they have to answer some questions. Our questions are such like, what is your interest in joining this group? Do you plan to model anything? And what are your civic interests within the Civil War railroading? So we can get a kind of a good screening process out of that. And if people don't answer the questions or they don't answer it like how to a standard we want, we don't have to let them in. So we can vet the people that we bring in. And so far we have 32 members. Some of them are here on the Zoom call, and I think we'll have a good start with that. It just needs a little growth, and that's what time allows us.
That's great. Yeah. And to Carl's point, I'm always open for suggestions around how to make us more present out there in the world. So Carl, if you or anybody wants to send me an email or what have you with a suggestion, please don't hesitate. I really appreciate that. It's great to see the group expanding, especially when we've got two new guys right here on the call.
What's
So-
the title of the group?
It's title of the actually what you all have on the shirts. American Civil
American-
War Railroads Historical Society.
Okay, easy to find.
Great. Cool. All right. So let's see. I'm just going to do a brief presentation on our meet and with a couple of highlights. I think this is the one.
Do you guys see me?
I see you now.
Okay.
David. I'm going to share my screen. Cool. All right. So based on the feedback I got from this slide last time, on the lower left is actually what I believe to be Fort Henry. What I had there before was an image of Fort McHenry. So okay, boy, do I keep learning. So this just highlights, the things that we did. We went to Fort Donelson. We went to we saw Fort Henry, or the water that it used to the water area that where it used to reside. And then we did some TTrak builds, which was a real highlight and a lot of fun. And then probably the key highlight was taking a trip on the Memphis and Charleston. So this was just the agenda. I'm just going to show it real quick just to give you an idea how we play this out. Wednesday's probably it's just kind of getting grounded in what we're going to be doing. And then Joe kicked it off with some TTrak overview, and he brought a couple of modules with him. And one was what Bernie did to give us an idea of, what you could do. He also brought some wonderful little paper models of buildings that they use in wargaming, but you can also, they're very user-friendly for the N-scale TTrak. And then, Thursday was pretty much the trip to the forts. Got a couple of shots of those. And we had a gorgeous day. Lee Miller he's always stellar in his presentations. And he had a buddy of his, I think his name JT, who's also a military
JR.
historian. What's that?
JR.
JR. And they really laid out the game plan for Donelson. And it was a lot of fun. They provided lunch and some drinks. And then later on, we had Charlie come in and do an overview for the M&C, and then we did some TTrak builds. And Friday we had some more time to do that, and then Dave presented a couple of presentations, one of which he's going to do tonight for us, which I think will be very cool. Revisits colors and discerning colors or what have you. And I know we've done this in the past, but Dave's got a couple of nuances to it that I think will be very helpful for those of us that are looking to identify colors from the prototypes. And then we did some more TTrak build, and then we went over to Charlie's. No, we didn't. Oh yeah, we did. That's when we went over to the ops session. And that was a hoot. Charlie did a great job putting together the train orders and what have you. And he actually did a really nice job for the most part of not interfering with anybody, since he was the dispatcher. And I know, when you're hosting a session, it's sometimes very easy to get seduced into like wanting to tell people, oh, you have a switch up there you have to throw or whatnot. And I think I just had to point that out. That was not necessary, only once, maybe twice. And but it was just a blast. And then we had the great dinner at the Rendezvous, super barbecue for the most part. And then Saturday, we were going to have an ops session, but Bernie jumped in and did an update on the Aquia line, which was very compelling. I mean, what he's doing is spectacular. If you ever get a chance to get down there near Alexandria, it's a must visit. And then we just shot the breeze. I think I did a little overview of my ops session to get some ideas around what are some possibilities for different trains and configurations I could use on my WNA ops sessions. And then Sunday we just hung out a little bit and debriefed and had some initial conversations about what we might do next year. And this is available. I mean, this is just some stats around our group and when it began and some of the elements that we always want to include and how many things we've done, whether it's the Zoom meets or annual meets and what have you, clinics, just to get an idea of how much we're actually accomplishing. And I want to thank everybody that offers, presents, hosts, and does all the things that you do to keep this vital. And then we do recognitions usually every annual meet. And we had a couple this time too, which I'll share with you in a second. So that was the room we were in. La Quinta was great. Their deal was if we can get 10 rooms, they'd give us this room for free. Matter of fact, we didn't even have it scheduled for Sunday, but they gave it to us anyway. I love those folks. They were just very accommodating. And this is Austin over here on the right. Since he's not on the camera, you can at least see him. You have David Borkman, Marty Vaughn, there's Roger, there's Joel, Mr. Schneider, myself, and Bernie. Here we are at Donelson. This is Lee Miller, and this is JR. They headed up all the interpretations as we toured the fort. I think you know most everybody else there. Beautiful days, you can see. And this was some of the TTrak work. How many ACW railroad modelers does it take, really? So it was a hoot. And Marty and Roger are working on some structures that are going to be going on the new module that we started while we were there. And here's the ops session over at Charlie's. You've probably seen some semblance of these photos over the years, but he's nearly complete. Charlie, you want to say anything about your layout that anybody might not be aware of in terms of how much you've accomplished since we were there last?
Well, a few Zoom sessions ago, I went over it's been 4 years. And so,
Wow.
Time flies. But yeah, it's pretty close. But again, as I was saying, the closer you get, all of a sudden you realize there are other things to do. And so, I look forward to getting telegraph poles and lines in there, trying to figure those out. May put a live steam engine in Huntsville for the machine shop, just for fun. And of course, I got a lot of miniatures still to do, and especially, some carriages and some wagons from the time. A couple of which there's one at a museum in Memphis. From the Civil War. It's a Patterson transfer coach, and I'd love to do a couple of those for the Memphis scene.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was a good time. Very good time. Let's see.
On that,
Oh, go ahead.
on that wood wrap, I've never noticed it. I assumed you'd have two things at the ends, and then you just pile up as much wood. Is each one of those loads supposed to be one tender full? So if you pulled up, you just take one of them? Or is that for drainage? Or maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Oh, it's just a stack of wood for
It's like 6 different distinct stacks. I've never seen that kind of thing.
yeah.
The 6-pack.
Right.
And then also I can't remember the hotel on the very far right, those balconies, are that wood or is that paper also? On the far left?
Over here?
Yeah,
Oh, next picture, other picture.
Oh,
Yeah, there.
Yeah.
The white ends. Is it paper or wood?
No, I'm about 99% wood. Some of the windows, are, titchy or whatever, and they're plastic, but everything else is wood. And sometimes we'll print brick paper and put that over you know, either plywood or MDF core.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's I can relate to that photo. And this here, this is this the thing that operates, Charlie?
Yes. Yes.
That's picking up bales, and then what do we have here? Oh yeah, David and Roger lead. Yep, with a coal train or an ore train. And certificates, like I mentioned earlier, it's just a certificate of appreciation. Dave for his clinics and Charlie for the op sessions that he's hosted in the past and Zoom presentations.
Hey, I need somebody to send me their highest resolution of Dave Schneider getting his. I don't have that for the photo archives.
You need this photo that I have in here?
The one on the left, yes.
Okay, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Yep. And I think, oh yeah, here's the rendezvous. This is exactly where we were last time. Great service. And we have a couple of wives here, Janet and Sue, and I think Marty's wife, Carol. And then we decided to go out on Saturday night and walk Beale Street and listen to some nice blues music. It was a lot of fun. And that's how it went in Memphis, guys. Good time. So Mr. Schneider,
Yes, sir.
whenever if you're ready, so are we. Otherwise, I'll fill in some space here.
Well, let's see here. I've got the thing up. What do I have to do? Get a Zoom? We've got to share the screen, right?
Yep. Woohoo.
Okay, then we'll go to the beginning. You all see that?
Yes,
Yep.
sir.
There you go.
Okay, now this was a presentation that I'd done a little bit differently the last time I attended one of these, but I added a large section on color because of that thread that I was following that was very active just prior to the convention. And so I want to give you some insights on how you could try to decipher what the colors actually are. It's actually a hard job, but sometimes you'd be surprised what resources are out there. And so without any further ado, let's all take a look at this. Okay, the first thing, of course, is to pick your subject. Okay, and don't forget that the research, this is a tacky thing, part inspiration, part perspiration. That's from Thomas Edison. But reality is you really have to be inspired and motivated to do this. And you have to dig, and you'd be amazed what pops up. So you got to remember, though, you're surrounded with poor historical records. There are a lot of obstacles. There's so many obstacles, a lot of people give up or they say it's not possible and stuff. And then there's a sudden lightning bolt hits you in the butt and you realize, oh my gosh, there's this. And so this was a skill that I developed over the years because I had to figure out what products I was going to make. And sometimes the products I made was dictated by the availability of information. I didn't just sit there and say, oh, I think this is a cool engine, I think I'm going to do it. No, I had to know that there was the information necessary. And that's pretty much the same with you guys too, because you like to modify your models, you like to repaint them. It's a complex operation, but it really takes determination more than anything else. Determination is the vital skill. So don't give up, because suddenly lightning bolt will show up and you'll suddenly discover something that you didn't know even existed. and bingo, you make the breakthrough. And some of these problems that you have, of course, like I said, the lack of documentation, the fact there's no blueprints or detailed dimensional data. Sometimes there's some, but generally very little. And the contemporary photos and drawings are hit or miss if you're going to find them at all. So you're always looking for sister engines. And if you can get some of these mass volumes, I purchased a volume, oh geez, it must be 20 years ago from some guy. It's a binder, and it was a complete list of Baldwin products up until the end of the 1800s. And it was all listed by the number, the build number and what it was and what railroad bought it, and very basic bare bones stuff, like the fact that it was a 10-wheeler or American or whatever it is. It wouldn't even say that, it would just say the size of the drivers. It would say cylinder sizes, things like that. Those are really not very critical. The driver size is, because that's how you actually try to scale photographs. I've scaled most of my photographs by looking at the drivers and having firm information. That's a 60-inch driver. Okay, that's 5 feet. So when you put the picture, you print the picture out and you lay your ruler over it, you know that this much is 5 feet. So then that allows you to start measuring all the different other dimensions. And the other thing that could really screw you up is misconceptions and errors that people have because they didn't follow through all the way, or they missed that key element. So always be aware that the source you're going to, especially if it's a published book that's relatively old, they may not have been even aware of things that were discovered in 30 years ago. You get a book that was written in the 60s, he doesn't know what researchers found in the 90s. So be aware of that. And of course, the question of the day was color, color, color. How do you find it in a black and white world? But it's more than just a black and white world. It's a wet plate black and white world, which interprets all the colors differently. So what exists? Well, like I said, builder data, very limited information, usually due to pretty poor record keeping or lost documents. Lost documents more than anything. It's mind-boggling how much has been lost. I had heard a tale one day told to me by a museum curator, actually the archivist, who was telling me that when the Norris company went bust and shut down, they simply threw everything in the trash. And there was an account of one person talking about a pile of broken glass negatives. So all of the factory photographs that they took were basically destroyed. So you got to be lucky. So you're looking for things, you decide, and this is where some of these builder data comes in, because you can figure out when the thing was built. Then you look for sisters being, similar engines that were built. And then you look for those photographs. So you don't have to say you want to find Yonah. Okay. I have never found a photograph of Yonah. Just there's drawings of Yonah, there's the painting of Yonah, but there is no photograph. I never found it. The one that for some period of time, I remember people were saying that there's this one old 440 that was in the in Atlanta yards, but that wasn't really Yonah. That was a Norris engine. But in any case, you look for sisters, and this is a good way to get a start. But remember, back then, every engine was made one at a time to the order of the person, of the company. So it may show you the general class, but it may not be exactly the way the photo shows. And of course, you could look for paintings and art, like the various Civil War series of what's his face? I just
Kurtz?
Huh? Kurtz, right.
Kurtz, E.O. Henry.
Kurtz's pictures are useful to some degree, but you got to be careful. When I was doing Yonah, I looked at that picture and I said, oh, wow, I wonder why they never bothered to fix the little shelf for the headlight. Well, the probability is that the headlight was there, but for some artistic reason, he decided to make it look more battered up. And the colors, of course, were subdued because he had a vague idea, being married to Fuller's daughter, and talked to Fuller about it, about what the colors would be. But he sort of, shades it to make it artsy. And so you can't really go that it was directly that color. But he also made a very common error that I'll talk about in a bit. And then, of course, there's the lithographs. But lithographs are designed as advertising. They usually show the engines over decorated because that was the fashion that they wanted to show, but they drew it the way the builder wanted to advertise it. So you got to watch out for lithographs, but they're often very useful and some are quite accurate. But it depends on the draftsman. It depends on the advertising desires of the company. So always be wary of your information and try to find something else. And then, of course, there's museums and there's secondary sources, meaning somebody's book will mention that some locomotive was green colored or blue colored. But then, last but not least, rumor and luck. I have been very lucky in my research, because as I did more and more engines and my reputation grew with more and more museums, I would get an incredible level of cooperation, an eagerness almost. And they would tell me all the little secrets that they had or all the little extra information. And so I would find out stuff that I didn't even know existed, but it was there. Okay, so just an example of builder data. Okay, in the basic builder data of Rogers, you have Yonah listed. Okay, it's construction number 164. It was built on 3/12/48. And its configuration was 4 drivers with a driver size of 60. And that's all it had. Okay. But you can figure things out yourself. Now, here's an example of where I actually worked on figuring dimensions of various lithographs based on the size of the drivers. And so what I would do is I would compare lithographs, I'd compare drawings, I'd compare all kinds of stuff and try to come out with ultimately a good estimation of what they actually are. And you need to do this sort of thing yourself too, because it gives you a sort of proportional thing. Now, in case of Yonah, there were no known photographs. Never found one, couldn't find one, checked with everybody, talked to a lot of people, including Colonel. And he was unable to say he never saw a picture of Yonah either. So then you look for sister photos, and lo and behold, there's one. And that's the Amenia, built for the New York and Harlem, which is the founding block that would become the New York Central. And it was Rogers build number 242, built in 1850. So it's 2 years younger, but it's still the same class. And so this was a major breakthrough. Now, this Amenia photo is actually pretty well known, and people have used it as their example of what Yonah looked like. In point of fact, Kurtz used the Amenia photograph as the Yonah. So if Kurtz couldn't find it with his connections in Atlanta, then there is no photo of Yonah. Now, this is the Amenia photograph, and it shows a typical engine of that style, of the Yonah style, with the Bury boiler and an outside frame. And it gives you a good idea of proportions, except that the Amenia had 66-inch drivers. But this is, if you look in some of the books and some of the illustrations, you're going to see this engine. And how do we know this? Well, because of blind, dumb luck. Because somebody knew something and got in touch with me. That individual was connected to a major railroad museum and had basically sent me a series of photocopies taken from an actual surviving Rogers correspondence and order book, which had the correspondence between the Western Atlantic and Rogers with specifications and changes they wanted to done to the Yonah. So that's why you never know what you're going to find. So here's, like I said, Kurtz, you know, he specialized in arts. He's fascinated by Andrew's raid, did a series of things. A lot of people consider him to be pretty authoritative, and he's not bad for an artist. However, here's the painting of Yonah. And what does it show? Well, besides that really ridiculous busted shelf there, it shows that basically the color was green. And that makes a certain amount of sense. Rogers, green was extremely popular in this era, and the descriptions of other things in general has also been presumed to be painted in that green. It shows the standard pilot that was built in the W&A shops. They used pieces of old strap rail iron to make them, and they saved a couple of bucks that way. However, there is a fatal error in this because he used the amenia, and we'll cover that in just a moment. Then there's lithographs. Okay, this is a Rogers lithograph dating from about 1850 or so, and it is showing the class of that engine. It's advertising it. I love lithographs because they're so bizarre in some ways. Look how tiny the engineer is. Makes this engine look absolutely enormous. But in any case, it is the same class as Yonah. It's about the same time. And Rogers was building a lot of these. It has certain characteristics that are the same, the Bury boiler, you know, things of that nature. Interesting, though, it shows a very restricted and small tube type pilot, which I suspect is that way only because they ran out of space on the size of the lithograph. So they squished that in. And then it has this really bizarre looking headlight lantern in the front. And the Radley and Hunter is narrower than usual and has the clean out port just above the light, so that when you go to clean the cinders out, you're going to mess up your lantern. Typically, the clean out port is on either the left side or the right side, so that's easier and doesn't dirty up everything.
What's right behind the bell?
This?
Yeah.
That is what's called a cannon safety. Very popular in early engines. There was two safeties on this engine. One would be up here, the usual place over the steam dome, and this one here was a safety covering all the tubes in the boiler. And it's called a cannon safety because of its shape. But sometimes you find some really great details on that you don't expect to find on a lithograph, like, for example, these wheel covers. Okay, they're there, but if you blow it up, you see this. And when you look at the amenia picture, you'll see that it has a shiny area right there, which implies it is a brass thing, hubcap. And here you can see that on amenia. You see how that's much lighter? It kind of matches that. And likewise, you could see some of the writing over here, the Rogers, Ketchum and Grosvenor, Patterson, New Jersey. It's there and it's there. So that matches up. This matches up over here with the brass here and here with a jacket that's Russia iron. This is the Bury boiler. This is the cannon safety. There's the whistle on its particular stand. There is a difference between this, though. The sandbox is located in front over here, in front of the cannon safety. The cannon safety's moved back to about here. So this doesn't quite match the lithograph, but it's damn close. Then you have drawings, okay? Now, there was a drawing somebody did, but it's based on that same Victory lithograph, which is nice because it's a good quality effort. But it still has the peculiar squished down pilot and the odd little headlight. And it shows the sandbox over here. But this was taken from the Rogers catalog of 1876. In 1876, in commemoration of the centennial and advertise their company, they put out an unusually large and information-filled catalog that showed the whole history of the Rogers company, including details on their running gear and things of that nature. And that was reprinted years ago in a softcover book. So if you could dig around, you can find the Rogers catalog of 1876, and it's definitely, it's inexpensive. It's definitely worth having. Yeah. Here's another thing from the catalog. This is their Rogers used and developed their own adjustable gear valve. It was basically a Stevenson system, but it was slightly different over here. And then this is a nice little detail, especially if you're looking for a detailed model. Now, this is the drawing of the Yonah as done by, what's his name? I used to be much more
Alexander.
Alexander, right. This is from Alexander's book. Thank you, DC. And it shows Yonah looking just like the photograph of the Amenia, except that the stack has been made into a full-sized Radley and Hunter. The headlight is a standard square headlight, and it's got the bar pilot of the WA's bar pilot. And as an a drawing, well, it's got nice measurements and all this other stuff. How he got these measurements is probably the same way I did, by using the drivers as a ruler. But there's some problems here, and one of the problems is, we're going to find out, well, there's several problems. This is unreliable. If you build a Yonah based on these drawings, you will not build the right engine. He also, though, addressed the mystery of the tender. The tender could have been a 6-wheel tender, or it could have been an 8-wheel tender. Rogers offered both types of tenders, and to cover his bases, he used both of them. This tender style with the big wheel in the front and the truck in the back is also repeated in White's locomotive book. In the section on tenders, he has a drawing of a Rogers tender, and it shows this type of configuration. So I'm willing to accept this. If White says so, I don't argue with him. So other sources are hit or miss. Sometimes you get hit gold, and sometimes it's a blowout. Museums, they are excellent sources to do research, but their collection is very varied. You never know what you're going to find, and it depends on the staff and how interested they are. A lot of these staffers, they don't want to sit there and babysit and answer 150,000 questions from some guy who's searching through boxes and boxes of photographs. And sometimes they do. And sometimes they will steer you if they're familiar with their collection. They say, oh, well, we've got this, 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 and this. And it's really been my experience that way. And it isn't always the ones you expected to have the material. For example, the Railroad Museum in Pennsylvania is a great source, but they have a lot of material on New England railroads, which I thought was really good. And for Baldwin, a lot of the early Baldwin paperwork that actually managed to survive, including shop erection drawings and things like that, is at SMU University over there in Texas. And in fact, I acquired a shop drawing of for one of my engines that I never got around to building that came from them. But it's a crapshoot. If you call up and you talk to somebody and they're busy, or they got a meeting coming on, they want to blow you off the phone or something like that, or the one who's really interested in the collection is off that day, and you're talking to the other person who says who doesn't give a shit, then you may not be guided to where you need to go. Now, then of course there's secondary sources, and we've got a great list on the website there of different books and things that you need a library of your own. But here's some advice: don't trust Edwin Alexander. He's okay, but people consider him authoritative. And if you follow exactly the way he does it, you're going to go wrong. His drawing of the drawing of the Yonah is incorrect, and like the drawing he did of the Lee's or ironclad car, totally ridiculous. And so, you know, he does good work and bad work, but it's whatever. The somebody came out some years ago called American Civil War Tactics. It was a man-at-arms book. It is the worst piece of crap I've ever seen. It's terrible. I mean, the guy, well, that's an English company, and I bet you they just had some staff or writer write something on this, and the drawings are ridiculous, and the information is shoddy. And there's a lot of others I can't list, but because there's so many. But as far as I'm concerned, I trust John White. He had access to stuff that you can only dream of, and he was very, very interested in railroads, and I have a lot of his books. And by the way, a lot of you guys have that soft cover book of his engineering drawings and stuff, the American Locomotive set.
Yep.
How many of you know that he came out with a hardcover enhanced volume with more information?
Whoa.
Yes, it's very hard to find. It's expensive when you find it, but it makes a big difference because it's like about 40, 50 pages more stuff. And it's good. Alan Stauffer was great with his railroad specific stuff. He dredged up photographs that you couldn't find anywhere else. If you're interested in the history of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, as far as the actual history of what engine was what and where it came from and what the people thought about it, it's in there because he was an engineer on the B&O and he wrote this book, but it was written in the 1800s and there's no pictures. But if you want to know what happened to which engine got stolen by Stonewall Jackson and where it wound up and how the B&O finally got it back or whatever, it's in there. George Abdul is great because he has lots and lots of photos, but it's only a starting point. He doesn't have everything. Nobody can have everything, but it gives you some ideas. It gives you especially some of his terrain and some of his yards and his trackage and stuff is great from photographs. Colonel Bogle was a remarkable individual. There was a popular book he put out called The General in Texas. It was not put together particularly great by the publisher or whatever, but it's out of print too. But if you forget something, it's got a lot of photographs. You want to see a photograph of every raider, he's got it. If you want to see schedules, he's got it. There's a bunch of stuff in there. But as far as the pictures of engines and rolling stock, it's not so good. There's a little known book that was published by the Pennsylvania Railroad Association or their group, okay, and unfortunately never went past volume 1 because apparently Mr. Adams passed, and that's the Locomotives of the Pennsylvania Railroad. It is excellent for photographs of PRR stuff in our era, pre-Civil War, Civil War, post-Civil War, but all 19th century stuff. And if you want to find out information, sometimes there's other sources that you can find that you wouldn't imagine have the sources. Like, for example, I found that in the state of Pennsylvania's archives in Harrisburg, they have a whole series of notebooks by the various shop managers of the Pennsylvania Railroad over a period of years. And that's where I found out, for example, that a lot of there was a big difference between what the railroad wanted to paint their engines and what the shop decided to paint their engines. Because there's notes in there about getting irate messages because they produced this engine in green, but the railroad wanted it in black. And I said, so what? This is what you get. So it's really very interesting. But when I was researching the B&O engine, not the B&O, the Pennsylvania engine, the D6 engines from the early 1880s, there was a whole big description as to how they would have been painted. And in there, in those notebooks was the information about how it was painted. Okay, and so there's Thomas Tabor's Antebellum Railroad. Now you can download that from it's impossible to buy a hard copy. I mean, I looked, and they only printed up, I think, 50 hard copies. If you ever find one, it'd be amazing.
Wow.
But he did upload it for free initially to the Railroad Historical Association, but they in turn don't have it on their site anymore. But there are universities that do, and you can access those universities and download an entire thing. It's 700 and something megabytes. But boy, does it have interesting stuff. His writing style leaves much to be desired. He tends to do just lists. His photographs have a tendency to be Xeroxed photographs of actual photographs. But if he has a Xerox photograph, you now know that photograph exists somewhere.
Mm.
So that's a good thing. And it's free. You download it, it's 700 megabytes. It's a PDF. It has every single Mickey Mouse to big railroad that existed prior to up to the start of the Civil War. So if you want to know about some XYZ railroad that goes from East Beaufort to West Beaufort, it's there, and what engines they had. And it's really good for seeing who sold what engine to the U.S. Military Railroad, et cetera, because they're all listed. So I found it very useful. And then, of course, there's rumor and luck. Okay. And sometimes it's who you know. Sometimes if if you're known as somebody, this was something I discovered the hard way. As I was in business longer and longer, produced more of these models, these guys, these are in the railroad museums, they're enthusiasts, most of them. And they began to reach out to me about what they want to do, what they would like to see and all this, and talk about, and then you get in correspondence and you find out what they have, and then you go out and visit or whatever and all that. And sometimes they will refer you to somebody. There's a gentleman who is today, probably since Colonel Bogle's gone, the #1 expert regarding the General and the Texas and the other engines from the Great Locomotive Chase. And he's an interesting fellow. He works multiple part-time jobs, but the coolest ones you can imagine. One is to work in the restoration shop over at the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum. He also is a fully certified engineer and runs locomotives on the Strasburg Railroad. And he also is a backup engineer for the 440 reproduction, full-size reproduction that runs over by the York and Gettysburg area. So,
Who's that, Dave? Who is that?
That's a secret.
Okay.
There's a lot of things I've been sworn to secrecy on.
That's all right. I get it.
Don't ever use my name,
Okay.
kind of thing. So you get the referrals. He'll refer you to something. You ask questions. You probe. Who do you know? Do you know anybody knows something? Anybody knows this or that or whatever? Okay, and that's how you get there. But it is the lottery. If you don't play, you can't win. I mean, you may not win. You may waste a lot of money on tickets, but you know what? You'll never win if you don't buy the ticket. And here it was. It so happens an order ledger still existed between 1848 and 1849 from the Rogers, Ketchum, and Grosvenor from the factory. And in it was the correspondence from Western Atlantic to them and back and forth with specifications for their engine. And so this is me, this was a Xerox page, very difficult to read the handwriting of these guys in the 1800s, but this is, done there. And here's a letter from the chief engineer in October 1848. This response to, he sent a letter on September 16th. He sent a letter, they sent back on the 25th. The mail went faster back then than now. And on the 12th. Okay. And so this is this is for the Yonah. And what is it? Well, yeah, okay. The passenger engine fell over the Monterey. Well, the Monterey was an engine on the South Carolina Railroad that apparently the guys in the Western Atlantic took a look at and said, wow, we like this engine. We'll get one of them. But here's item number 6. Dispense with the safety valve on the boiler, the one on the dome being sufficient. What does that tell you? Every single drawing and illustration of the Yonah is incorrect. Alexander is incorrect. Kurtz is incorrect. There is no cannon safety on the boiler. It was dispensed with. Then there's the question of the tender. Was it an 8-wheel tender or was it a 6-wheel tender? Well, there it is. Tender, same as Monterey's, of 6 wheels. There is no stronger source than original. Okay, the original source says it's a 6-wheel tender. That means anyone who puts a 4-wheel tender on it is wrong. And of course, anyone who saw the Amenia photograph would immediately put a 4-wheel tender on Yonah and a cannon safety. Deliverable February 1849. Price including house, meaning the cab, because he charged extra for a cab even then. And the patent fee on arrestor, that's the Radley and Hunter, okay, was included. And it cost $6,200 for that locomotive. And the name of the engine, Yonah, which by the way means bear in Cherokee. And so this is how you find stuff out. Now, what about colors? Oh yeah, then there's the design work. Here's my design work. You see, you got a normal type of pilot. There is no cannon safety over there. Okay, there is a Radley Hunter that is properly sized and normalized with the clean out valve on the left side, on the fireman's side, which is typical, most typical. And there's all the writing and the printing on it, just like in the drawing and the lithograph, plus the Amenia photograph showed the drawing, and then I even did the wheel covers and made that readable. So that's a CAD drawing. They mostly do 3D nowadays, but back when I was doing it, it was all CAD. All the measurements in millimeters. That's because it's for the model. So what about color? All right, well, we all know that it was wet plate photography, and it absorbs colors differently than black and white in modern black and white. So you can't compare it to any kind of modern color chart. Some black and white, you can pretty much guesstimate the color, okay, from the shades that appears. The modern black and white is capable of very subtle shade differences. Okay, well, wet plate is not. The big advantage of wet plate is it creates a solid image instead of a dot, which means you can zoom in, and you can see handprints on the dust on the back of the tender, and things like the oil can sitting on top of the back of the back end of the boiler, things like that. And you have an extended depth of field due to long exposure, which is great too, because then you can see the whole engine from one end to the other is all in the same focus, and you can zoom stuff in. So it gives you consistent photo quality. Now, the next 2 slides are from this paper that was written by one Virginia Mencher, and it's called The Mystery of Wet Plate Photographs in Color. Okay, that's available online. If you go and look it up, you'll get all kinds of more stuff than what I'm showing here. But here's an example of wet plate. Okay, so here's a wet plate of swatches. Okay, in black and white. Here's a wet plate, not a wet plate. Here's a swatch. Here's the same swatches with regular black and white. Notice that there's all sorts of subtle differences that don't match up. But here's what the actual colors are. And it's important to understand that yellow and red come out as black. Okay. And that's important. Okay. And this explains, by the way, I always used to wonder when I look at photographs of Civil War soldiers, they often look very dark. Okay. And I came to the conclusion after learning about this is that they must be sunburned. because they had reddish in the face, it may turn it into blackish in the face. But when I was younger, I said, oh, they're really bunch of dirty guys. Here's different fabrics. And I like to point out that there's no way you would know what color these are. Okay, look at this tartan pattern. It's almost unrecognizable. This green thing is blue, is a medium gray, but you don't know what that's going to be. These details, look how bright the white details are, but the red comes out black. And here's, of course, with modern black and white, you can tell more differences, but it still doesn't tell you what the color is unless you know. Now, here's something interesting. She had a group of people, of reenactors, women wearing all sorts of period clothing. And this is the wet plate picture. That's the black and white picture. There's the color picture. Okay. And what you're seeing here is everybody's complexions are different. Okay. This dress here, which is dark blue, okay, comes out here as a dark color, but here for some reason it's lighter. But blues are usually black. Who knows? Then she did threads. And if you notice, most of the threads are black, 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 and black. And this one has various shades, but there's the actual colors. So you can't go by that. How do you go by that? I'll show you it a little bit. Sometimes you get lucky. This is something that was given to me by, I had to dedicate my eldest child to serve Satan to get this. And he won't mind. And in any case, though, look at this. Oh my. Mauser's Coach Colors. This is a commercial color swatch from the period around 1870-ish. And it's got the control colors, the standard Kodak control colors next to it. This would allow you to see it. Now, what makes this interesting, though, is that this was kept very in a closed box for decade after decade after decade after decade. By the time I got to see it, it was already kept in a temperature controlled room that people weren't allowed to just wander in and out of. But this gives you some standard colors that sometimes if you're looking and reading about descriptions of locomotives, they'll say, oh, it is painted in with lake. Okay, well, what's lake? Well, lake is actually a rich brown color, and you can see it over here. It's actually a little bit reddish, but it's really a dark brown. But the colors have changed a little bit over the years. Here you have Tuscan red, which you can see how much darker that's turned. But in any case, there's another thing you have to remember when you're dealing with paints. These guys didn't sell cans of paint. They sold color. They sold containers of color, and the painters at the railroad, at the manufacturers, had to mix it into medium. And if they mixed it with a slightly different amount in it, or they mixed it in a different medium, one kind is for varnish versus another kind of varnish, or any of that, then they would wind up, with a slightly different shade. So the shade, even with this, is not particularly guaranteed to be a authoritative. Now, there's some more than just this, too. There's this, and this was posted, I believe, on our web site, right? This is available. It used to be available, and it shows some of these colors, okay, and showed a company called Phoenix Precision who produced these paints. I don't know if the company still exists or not, but chrome green, if you want to do a Western Atlantic Rogers, or any Rogers the period, chrome green probably is the color you need to have as your base color with all the other trims. And up here, the reds, claret was really popular in the 1860s, and then it gradually got darker and darker. There's Indian red. Cook started using Indian red. The Texas was done in Indian red. Like I said, this is available last time I looked. Now, there was a whole discussion of how the roofs were painted. Okay. Now, this one on the right-hand side is a company that produced roof paint with the magic mineral asbestos. So they sold powder, this color powder with asbestos in it to make it fireproof, to more fireproof. And the painters just breathed in those fumes as they dumped the paint into the medium. The problem with this one, though, is it suffers pretty severely from fading. And so if you look at some of these colors, you see here's slate, okay, and it's got a greenish tinge to it. And this gray seems to have turned also greenish, okay, and the red. So what did I use, for example, on my trains for roofs of the cabs and the decks of the tenders and other things? Generally either red or gray, although I update, made the presumption that this is essentially a faded color, but it gives you choices of colors at least. And so this is the different roofs. Over here, this is another company, all right, and more colors, okay. And you'll see all these different yellows, primrose yellow and Messina chrome yellow, lemon, or whatever you want to call it. The colors don't matter, but sometimes when you read a description of an engine, it will give you the base color. And so with this, you can usually figure it out. Now, here's an example of how I interpreted colors to come up with this one. This is this is a studio picture taken by the manufacturer. This is a manufacturer's photograph. I clipped it because to make it fit, so you don't see the trucks and stuff. This is a tender of the Mason locomotive, the McCallum, which was built for the military railroad. And it's one of the most colorful and spectacular tenders I've ever seen. And I really, really wanted to do this. And so I did. But how did I turn this into this? Okay, I'll show you in a few minutes. But basically, you start out knowing darn well that this flag is red, white, and blue. Right? So you know that. You know the color the eagles are going to be. They're brown with a red, white head and stuff like that, right? Then you look at this guy and everything's dark. Well, that's not quite right. So you lighten his hair, lighten the hair, lighten the face, and give him a background that seems reasonable, and make his union uniform proper color. If you can't see it here, but it actually does have the shoulder straps there. All I did was turn this blue and throw some yellow there, and boop, there you got it, General McCallum in all his glory. Now, as far as the scroll work goes, this is a very typical style of scroll work. It's gold with various shadings done. And the name up top, well, the name on top was it's clearly not all solid gold, so I thought, right, red would be nice. And so it's red, white, and blue. Now, why did I go with red, white, and blue? Oh, yeah, and here's the Haupt. Okay, the General Haupt. General Haupt description said it was painted like a Union general's uniform. And if you look at the tops of the domes, you'll see there's stars there. Those have to be gold if it's a Union General's thing. And you know that the paint color is going to be generally dark blue with gold highlights, because that's a description. Now, that's how it came out. This looks a little greenish. It's not that greenish, but this was all based on what seemed logical. And I'll show you why it seemed logical in a moment. but basically there it is. It's Union blue. You know, it's got the stars because you can't see it in this particular thing, but you blow it up more, you'll see there's a line of stars. Those have to be gold. You know, the name has to be gold. Those stars on top, there has to be gold, and it has to be dark blue to do it because that's the description, just logic. Now, how do you tell the builder what colors you want? Well, it's by using what they call Pantone colors. Pantone is a system of, you buy these marvelously expensive books with thousands of these color shades in it, and you match up the shade the best you can to the way you can do it. And then you tell them what color you want. And if you look over here, it's hard to see a little bit, but the headlight, I wanted maroon, Pantone 188 with black stripes. Why did I want that? Because I thought it was a nice color, and besides, red would, you know, who's going to argue? It's logical. They did paint stuff that color, and it kind of looks that way. And, you know, what are you going to do? But sometimes, you know, you can do other things. Here's the sand dome, had some brass color with green. Here's the tender deck cab roof is brown, this Pantone shade, which I matched up as best I could to the color sample I showed a little bit earlier, but I darkened it a bit because the color sample's faded. And bingo, that's how this thing got done. And that's what it looks like. And there's the 6-wheel tender. There's the wheel covers with the writing on it. There's this the writing on it. There's no Canon safety, and a basic, very common style, inexpensive headlight. There's your stack. There's the clean out. After all, the fireman should be the guy to clean the cinders out. You don't want the engineer to do it. Okay, so let me just show you a couple of other things here real quick. I need to reshare this because I wanted to show you, I have a just bear with me here. I want to get that.
One thing I will comment on while you're doing that is that
Okay.
you made reference to luck and determination. And I would say, yeah, just in my own experience, the luck that I got was a result of the persistence. You know, it's you keep finding leads, you keep looking. You know, it's the drive is essential, and I think we generate our own luck because of the intention that we have in the pursuit of whatever it is we're pursuing. So, acknowledgement to you for the tenacity you had to keep pursuing that. And I have a question for you when you're done with your presentation.
Okay. I'm just about to, I'm trying to.
The other thing I was going to say is in that Kurt's painting of the Yonah, I'm wondering if it was possible that when he was talking to Fuller, that he said that at that time, the lamp was not on there and there was some damage and they just took it before they had a chance to repair it. Is there plausibility in that at all, do you think?
There's always plausibility, whether it's lightly, you know, that he'd even recall that little bit of information. Remember, this is Fuller is an old man, you know.
Right.
So I don't ascribe much to it. I don't know why it's there, but that it could be somebody may have known it, noticed it, and told him. Now, if I can just get this thing to share. Come on, come on. Oh boy. No, it's not letting me do this, but I wanted to show you the I have a lithograph from William Mason of this period of time, mid 1850s. This is the actual same class engine as the William Mason engine. And it was painted, the lithograph shows it with blue with the red striping, pinstriping and all that. So I just used that. That's where my basis was this lithograph. I didn't simply shoot from the hip and say, I think I'm going to put red stripes on it.
Right.
No, the cab windows, the wheels, the trucks are blue with wheels that are red. There's pinstriping on the wheels, that sort of thing was all there. I just can't seem to do it. It's telling me that I'm not in Zoom anymore, but I guess I am. It says it's telling me leave. I'm trying not to leave. It wants me to leave.
Oh yeah, don't leave. There should be, you don't have that little icon at the bottom that says share screen like you did before?
Well, I'm going to try it again. See here. Well, you keep talking. I'm going to keep messing with this.
Okay. What else would I say?
Dave, do you have the photo you want to share up on your computer?
What's that now?
Do you have that image open on your computer?
Yes.
Okay. And you clicked on the share and it doesn't allow you to pick, the window doesn't pop up that allows you to pick it?
I think I'm about to figure that out. Yep. There you go. You see it?
Oh yeah.
Yes, sir.
Now you see how that looks like the one I showed you, the fact that it's blue with the red trim and all of that, and the Russian iron areas and the brass on the domes, and this has a unusual domed sand dome,
Yeah.
which is an interesting story in itself. I think I mentioned to you guys that we're at the convention that basically the William Mason. Well, first of all, Baltimore Ohio Railroad, were starting in the 1850s, stopped giving any engines names. They had numbers, and so the original William Mason of today was engine number 25. There's no super early picture of engine number 25, but according to my book on Mason engines, because somebody wrote a book on everything, just seems. B&O bought two engines at the same time, and were delivered at the same time, and so one was given 25 and one was given 26. And so the picture of the archivist over at the B&O Railroad Museum said, "Oh, take a look at this picture," while I was there one time, and whoop, laid this on me. I said, "What the hell is this?" "Oh, that's the sister engine of the William Mason as delivered." And it had that particular round dome, and it had an interesting headlight. It had a round headlight that was mounted. This doesn't even show a bracket for a headlight, but that's very common lithographs because nobody gives a shit about a headlight. But the other thing is Mason issued this particular lithograph in two different colors, one in blue and one in green. And that justified me doing one of the other Mason engines, in green. So just to, and according to the book, green was actually his favorite color. And so the majority of engines were built in green. Well, there you go. But sometimes sometimes it's your best guess. That's all I can say.
Right. So Dave, I'm looking at that sand dome. How would they have refilled that dome? Because that little cap looks kind of small.
It does, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah, like
it looks like they'd have to take a funnel, take the cap off, stick a funnel, and have somebody with a barrel of sand or something, like shaking it in or something, whatever. All I know is that in the mid 1850s, when this was issued, and when the Mason was delivered, I think it was delivered at 58. It had that dome, and it's very distinctive, but they stopped using it. by the 1860s. No, but none of them had that dome. None of the later pictures. Only the earliest pictures have that dome.
Got it. I guess so the ones that are more cylindrical, maybe that whole cap came off to make it easier to pour sand in, or was it similar? John, what do you think?
Well,
I think the small cap is probably, that was it.
Hmm.
They
it
just
looks like a cap, doesn't it?
poured
It
poured
looks
the
like
sand in.
something that would unscrew.
Yeah, it most likely just sat there like any other sand dome lid. It's bigger than anybody thinks it is because of the scale of the drawing. They just lifted it off. They probably had a bucket with a spout on it,
Hmm,
up with dry sand.
interesting.
Or they may have had an
Or a
oversized
hose coming out of something.
watering can. You know, a bucket with a spout on it that was specially used for that.
Hmm. Okay.
Now, if you want to see a picture of 26, I actually have this in this file here.
Before you go, it's interesting to note that the clean out is facing forward
Yeah.
on your stack there.
Yeah.
And your pilot is your foreshortened pattern, which harkens right back to what
Right.
we're talking about on the Yonah. So it looks like the same sort of logic is going on. Maybe they were running out of the edge of their stone plate for the.
Well, you know, lithographs is stones, yeah, and I'm sure they were standardized size because if you notice, they go to each edge as close as they possibly can.
What are you looking at?
I'm looking at the edge of the cab roof,
Oh,
okay, and that's kind of like butted up against the end too, and then
Yeah, you're right to the edge of the stone.
yeah. So you know, there are exaggerations, and likewise that eagle crest over there on the builder's crest. There's no photographic evidence to ever show that that was the case. So that may have been simply just a way to advertise a little bit more.
Yeah.
yeah. The thing I look at too is noticing those pilot wheels. It seems like one of them would be hitting that cylinder if they went around a curve.
Yeah, it does look that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
No,
speaking,
that cylinder looks smaller, and just about all the other pictures.
Oh, that's a pretty
are
small
angled.
cylinder too. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I think they started at the back end or something. I don't know where they started, but somehow or another they had to do some what do they call it? The creative license.
Yep. And the cylinders were typically brass, right? Always. They wouldn't.
Yeah, brass. Yeah, because the brass stood up better to the heat because it didn't start rusting on the insides and things like that. You know.
And the valve box, I don't know what you call that, where the snifter valve is, that the box on top of the cylinder.
Yeah.
Chest.
Would that steam chest, would that have been painted at all, or no? That would have been brass.
Brass.
At this time, brass. Yeah. At this time,
got-
it was brass. Eventually, they would change, you know, things, but back then the problem was corrosion, and the brass was more resistant to corrosion because that's where all the work is being done, you know, and you don't
Right.
have your cylinders start, you know, leaking faster than necessary.
I got to repaint some of my cylinders brass.
Yeah.
Did it change to being angled, and then because like way later when you get to the 1900s, all cylinders I've seen are horizontal like that, but all the pictures you're
Well, the
showing.
1850s is when that change took place. Okay. There was an evolution between, you know, the angled cylinders, which is and the horizontal cylinder, which is more efficient. The problem was the trucks. It's when Rogers was actually, I think, the first ones to come out with a spread truck. And that allowed them to start doing that, but everybody jumped into it. The thing about Mason was he was the one who kind of set the proportions of the engines. He's famous for that straight line because he was an artist. He was a musician and an artist and stuff, and he didn't like how the engines seemed to be just stuff dumped on top of each other as willy-nilly. So he developed a cylinder saddle. He developed the idea of the stack being perfectly in alignment like that, the dome arrangements, making it more regular. Basically, all from about 1860 onwards, all of them are basically copying Mason's design. But let me try to dig up that.
That lever behind the smokestack, is that to close it for rain or something, or? Yeah,
What,
there-
this?
Yeah,
That's the screen. Okay, there was this is not a Radley and Hunter stack which had an open hole here. This is a standard balloon, and this is a latch, and they do this. And my models have that. You can actually it actually works if you want. If you get a 3-rail model that has a smoke unit in it, you got to open the screen to drop the fluid in there. But this was hinged here, and it flipped up, and it allowed access to, I don't know why they thought they needed access unless it needed to be scraped down or something like that. But there's a typical balloon stack that wasn't patented. Now, let's see if I can. Like what? Let's see if I can stop share. Okay, now here we go. Now, how to find the share I want to share. To think I used to be a Microsoft certified engineer. And that's not a train engineer. Okay. Do you see this one?
I see you, David.
Do you see a black and white engine?
No.
just two.
No? All right, well, I guess I need to go through this again. There we go. Now you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, this is number 26. Number 25 is the William Mason. This is number 26. They delivered at the same time. You can see that the shine on the cylinder, by the way.
Yep.
But
And
there's that
boiler.
unusual round. But you know, the railroads supplied the lanterns. All engines were delivered without lanterns, as far as I know. But that's a very, very early picture, and that's what you call a sister engine, all right, because I'm sure that Mason delivered them identical.
And the manufacturer built the pilot, right?
Not always.
Not always, right? Yeah, not always. Yeah.
Oh. Oh, okay. So that's
That was most likely a B&O pilot. Especially for something delivered in the middle 1850s.
Yeah.
so
Large-
it was just the South that had the horizontal pilots.
Well, the horizontal pilot for the W&A, though, that was, I think they all pretty much did the same thing. They used some of the old strap iron that they had miles and miles of, and it was supposedly made from strap iron.
Went even
I've seen pictures of other Southern engines that had also the horizontal. So maybe they all copied. It's a good way to use junk.
Yeah.
Though I don't know if it be way too much, because a lot of these pilots were made out of just wood.
Mhm.
And you know, strap iron pilot's going to weigh a lot more, but perhaps not in the scheme of things. I don't know. Yeah, this was a unique photo. I wasn't aware of its existence, but it was given to me personally by the archivist at the B&O Museum, just because.
That's great. Cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
Any questions? Yeah.
Wow. Great presentation.
Excellent. Lovely work, David.
Thank you.
Thank you much, David.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
Yeah. So, quick question for you. How did you get hooked into Civil War railroad stuff?
Oh, God, that goes way, 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 way back. I think the Civil War railroad bug bit me in 1959. I already was fascinated by trains. My dad bought me my first Lionel train in 1957. and I went nuts over it. It was a Santa Fe engine, but in any case, I still have it. I still have the whole train. It was a train set, and if I played with it incessantly. I set it up in the living room, and they'd yell at me because I'd have to take it down because it got in everybody's way and all this other stuff. Then the next day I'd set it back up again. But what really got me into the Civil War was the centennial and the uproar about the centennial, and then the happenstance that occurred. Now my family.
Sorry, I don't have anything till tomorrow afternoon, and nobody else has submitted in.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, well, what happened was one day I came into the shop. I see now my family. My father was the third generation to run a butcher shop in this one town in New Jersey, in Long Branch, and the family had been there since 1890s. In any case, I always came home after school to help at the shop because that's what happens in a family business. And what happened was somebody somehow in change, he found an Indian head from 1864. It was beat up. It was in terrible shape. But when I came home from school, he gave it to me. And it just electrified me that I actually was holding something that a Civil War soldier or somebody could have had in their pocket during the Civil War. Was mind-boggling. And then Lionel came out with their general. And it looked just like every general they'll ever make again because it's the same damn mold. But in 1959, it was brand new for that year. And I badgered the hell out of my parents because they didn't like buying, and it was expensive. Okay. But I got a general set, and that's that. And after that, it's, as they say, the rest is history.
Right. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you again, man. It's good. I'm always curious to help people get on this track, so to speak.
Yeah, they had a little history book on the Great Locomotive Chase that came with the general set, and in the back, if you sent them 50 cents, they would send you a poster of the picture of the general in the Chattanooga station, on display.
Yeah.
I got my mom to get a frame for it, and it was framed and put in my room, and
Nice.
I stared at it incessantly, and it just never, I was going 8 years old, going on 9, and ever since then.
Yeah, the imprint, I call it. Yeah, good. Well,
Yeah.
gentlemen, thank you for sticking around. This was great. It was good to see you all. And stay tuned. Well, there'll be another one. I think we might have Chris Gerlach next time. I think what's he doing? The City Point? Is that what he's doing?
City Point and Army line.
And the which?
City Point and Army.
City Point and Army. Got it.
Yeah,
Good.
France Railroad.
Right. Okay, guys. Phil, take a nap. Everybody have a good night, and we'll see you next time. All the best.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
Appreciate it.
All righty.